All right, today we are jumping into a brand new kind of battleground. This one isn't fought with armies and tanks, but with algorithms and data. We're talking about the growing war on AI-powered scams, and maybe more importantly, how we're finally starting to fight back.
So let's just start with a number that should really make you sit up and listen. 2,100%. According to security researchers, that's the absolutely staggering surge in deep fake voice scams. And look, these are not your grandma's robocalls. These are incredibly sophisticated AI-driven attacks that are designed to sound completely real. The threat is here, and it is scaling at a rate that is, frankly, unbelievable.
So the big question is, how do you even begin to fight an enemy like this? Well, the counterattack is really unfolding on two major fronts. On one hand, you've got the technological sword. That's the code being written for our own devices to jam the scammers' tech. And on the other hand, you have the regulatory shield. Those are the laws being put in place to protect all of us from the financial fallout. We're going to dive into both.
You know, to win a war, you first have to understand your enemy. So let's kick things off by breaking down exactly how these new AI scammers actually pull this off. It's a really slick three-part pipeline that lets them have a totally convincing real-time conversation with you.
Here's how it works. First, a system called automatic speech recognition, or ASR, listens to your voice and turns your words into text. Then, a large language model, yep, the same tech behind things like ChatGPT, reads that text and instantly comes up with a clever, in-context reply. And finally, a text-to-speech engine, TTS, speaks that reply out loud in a supernatural human-sounding voice. This whole loop happens so fast, you'd swear you're talking to a real person.
That whole process sounds pretty foolproof, right? But here's the thing. Like any chain, it has a weak link, and researchers have really zeroed in on it. So the multi-million-dollar question is, where is this whole automated scam system the most vulnerable?
And the answer is the very first step, the ASR system. It is literally the AI's ear. See, if you can mess with its ability to actually hear and correctly transcribe what you're saying, the whole scam just falls apart. The language model gets garbage input, so it spits out a garbage response, and poof, the illusion is shattered.
Okay, so if the big weakness is the AI's hearing, how do we exploit it? Well, that brings us to the first major front in this war, a really clever technological defense that is designed to, you guessed it, fight AI with AI.
It's a framework called ASR Jam, and the idea behind it is just brilliantly simple. As you're speaking, it injects a special kind of noise into your voice, something researchers call adversarial perturbations. Now, to another person, you sound totally normal, but to the scammer's AI, your words become complete and utter gibberish.
And this whole thing works because it exploits a huge gap between how we hear and how machines hear. Our brains are these incredible filters. We're wired to pick out speech and just tune out background noise. But ASR models, they're actually pretty brittle. They're trained on super clean audio, so they just can't handle this carefully crafted noise that's designed specifically to jam them up.
There's a new tool based on this whole idea called EchoGuard. And instead of just adding something that sounds like static, it uses distortions that sound natural to us, like the echo or reverberation you'd hear if you were talking in a big empty room. We can easily process that. But because those kinds of messy sounds are almost never in the ASR training data, they totally trip up the AI transcription models.
And this chart just shows you how well it works. Researchers came up with something called a utility index. It's basically a score that balances two things: how well it messes up the AI and how pleasant, or, not annoying, it is for a human to listen to. And as you can see, EchoGuard scores way, way higher than other jammers. It's effective and it's practical. So we have this powerful new tech sword to fight back with, which is amazing. But it also raises a much bigger question. Should the entire burden of defending ourselves fall on us as individuals? I mean, don't the giant institutions that handle our money and our data have a responsibility here too? And that brings us perfectly to our second front, the regulatory shield. Now we're looking at this global push to figure out who is ultimately accountable and, let's be honest, who has to pay up when one of these scams actually succeeds. Let's take a look at Singapore's shared responsibility framework. It doesn't just react to scams after they happened. It actually forces banks to take proactive steps. This includes things like a mandatory 12-hour cooling-off period for risky stuff like adding a new payee, real-time alerts for all kinds of transactions, and a 24/7 kill switch that lets you instantly freeze your own account if you think something is wrong. So what this does is create something called a responsibility waterfall. It's not about the bank automatically paying you back.
Instead, the liability flows downwards. If the bank did everything it was supposed to do, but you still got scammed, you might be out of luck. But if the bank failed on one of its duties, then it's on the hook. It's a really powerful incentive for these institutions to actually follow the rules.
Of course, Singapore isn't the only one trying to figure this out. Countries all over the world are developing their own playbooks, and each one has a slightly different philosophy on how to handle these just devastating losses. This slide gives you a great little snapshot of the different strategies out there. You've got the UK, where there's a big push for mandatory reimbursement, often with banks splitting the cost of the fraud 50-50. We just talked about Singapore's blame the rule breaker approach. And then you have China, which goes hard on penalties. We're talking huge fines and even suspending licenses for companies that don't do enough to stop fraud.
Hong Kong has another really fascinating model. They have this app called Scammeter, and it's all about empowering you, the user. Before you send money or even answer a call, you can pop the bank account or phone number into the app, and it'll check it against a police database of known scams. It gives you a real-time risk score.
So you can really see the two different philosophies at play here. Do you give the user better tools to protect themselves, like Hong Kong is doing? Or do you put all the pressure on the system and just punish the big institutions when they fail, like in China? There's a real debate going on about which way is actually better. So all of this really brings us to the future of our own security. It is becoming crystal clear that to win this war, we can't just pick one strategy. We're going to need a unified battle plan that combines both of these fronts that we've been talking about. The tech sword, tools like EchoGuard, gives us a proactive, real-time defense that empowers each of us as individuals. The regulatory shield, on the other hand, all these global frameworks, creates systemic accountability that protects everybody. They're not competing ideas at all. They're totally complementary. The sword is for winning the battle in the moment, and the shield is for protecting the entire kingdom.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty critical question. Because make no mistake, this is an arms race. As our defenses get smarter, you can bet the AI scammers are going to get smarter too. The tech and the laws are going to have to constantly evolve just to keep up. So the question isn't really about who will win the war. It's about who's going to win the next battle.